So my top 2 central midfield targets for Manchester United in 2025 would be number 1 Tijani Reijnders at AC Milan and number 2 Angelo Stiller at Stuttgart. Now I do still like Adam Wharton, but because he'd probably cost a similar amount if not more than Tijani Reijnders, and I just think Reijnders is a level above Wharton, whilst also having a more complete skill set because he is 5 or 6 years older than the Crystal Palace player. I just think if you're going to spend big money, you spend it on Reijnders, and then Wharton you can still go back and get in 1 or 2 years time, potentially being an upgrade on Manuel Ugarte in a few years time, and United can go in and get him then. But for this summer, because of our limited transfer budget, I would be looking to bring in Frank-Andre Anguissa on a free, coming in as essentially what is a backup to Mainu and Ugarte, providing squad depth on a low salary, low transfer fee. He's in his prime right now. I think him alongside either one of Angelo Stiller or Tijani Reijnders would be perfect. I would prefer Reijnders as I just think he has a bit more athleticism to his game than Stiller, and I do want to prioritise athleticism in Amorim's central midfield double pivot. But in terms of his all-round game, apart from maybe his incisive passing, I would probably say that Reijnders is a superior player to Stiller. But the reason I like Stiller so much is not just because he'd probably cost maybe 15, 20 million pounds less than Tijani Reijnders, with Stuttgart likely demanding around 35 million pounds for the soon-to-be 24-year-old, but also because I think he suits Amorim's possession strategy to a T. See, Amorim wants his side to be able to build up through the centre of the pitch, and under Sebastian Hoeneß at Stuttgart, who uses a very similar possession setup to Roberto De Zerbi, but also one that's very similar in strategy to Amorim, we've seen just how good Angelo Stiller can be at progressing the ball in behind the opposition's midfield line, intentional with his play through the centre of the pitch, having the ability to receive the ball off the centre-backs, and crucially, he has the ability to disguise his passes just like prime Busquets would do, and it's probably the thing I look out for in deeper line playmakers most in modern football. Adam Wharton is also capable of this, but I think Stiller is a level above. He's so good at just retaining possession, popping passes through the centre, and splitting the opposition's midfield line. I'm also don't think out of possession in terms of his athleticism or his defensive contribution, he's as good as either Reijnders or Wharton. He certainly isn't a liability, definitely having the baseline athleticism, physicality, and defensive contributions to function in a double pivot, either alongside Mainu or Ugarte. Now I'll come back on to Stiller and even Reijnders towards the end of the video, looking at how they would improve United tactically, but first, considering that both of these would be summer transfers rather than January transfers, Amorim is going to have to rely on both Kobbie Mainu and Manuel Ugarte staying fit to avoid playing Christian Eriksen or Casemiro. However, Bruno Fernandes' performances, particularly against Liverpool on the weekend, to me shows why he can be the sort of player who can drop back into the double pivot, and just as we've seen with players like Steven Gerrard, Paul Scholes and Hakan Çalhanoğlu, can transition from more of an offensive-minded central midfielder to more of a deeper line playmaker. But before I use some video analysis to break down exactly why I think this, a reminder that I do have an in-game Instagram group chat which you can sign up for on my Patreon. We had some interesting discussions throughout the Liverpool match, so if you do want some live analysis when you're watching the Manchester United games, or just to join into the discussions whether it's during the game, or to ask questions in the Q&A at the start and at the end of the week, then sign up to my Patreon. I'll leave it linked in all the usual places. So I got these clips from United Backy on X, so go over to his account, he uploads highlights and things like that. I'll leave his page linked down in the description. So this clip starts with Ugarte showing exactly what he brings to the Manchester United midfield, winning the 50-50 against Gakpo, and Maguire's going to play the pass back into Bruno Fernandes, who has space in the centre of the pitch, but as Bruno receives the ball, you can see that Mazraoui on the far side has space to run into, but he isn't advanced enough in order to take advantage of it. And this is where Bruno Fernandes puts to bed the myth that he just plays Hollywood passes and that he can't function in a possession-orientated system, as rather than playing the early switch of play out to Mazraoui before he's set in position, Bruno Fernandes receives the ball and shapes like he's going to play it over to the left side. And this shows high intelligence from a central midfielder in a big game, as not only does this entice McAllister over, as Bruno is shaping like he's going to play the pass into Dalot, but the rest of the Liverpool defensive shape is also expecting this pass to go out to the left, and Bruno Fernandes disguises it fantastically well, sells McAllister, works the ball back onto his right foot, and now Mazraoui has advanced into that space and Bruno Fernandes switches play perfectly with a swerve pass with his right foot going straight into the path of Mazraoui, and now United, because of Bruno Fernandes' in-game intelligence and clever switch of play, are able to create a 2v1 on the far side with Amad and Mazraoui against Van Dijk. So that was an example of Bruno Fernandes' quality when he receives the ball in front of the opposition's midfield line, But what about when he's higher up, situated between the lines? Well, we can see here that Maguire has the ball in the centre of the back three, and this is what I really like about Harry Maguire playing as the central centre-back. Because in comparison to De Ligt in that position, I think Harry Maguire not only has better vision and is a better passer from these deeper areas, but is also able to put disguise on these passes, which I don't think De Ligt can do to the same level. And we see it here. Maguire's shaping like he's going to play the ball out to United's right side. The Liverpool players on that side are anticipating the pass out to De Ligt, and so their body positioning is pushed over to that side. But at the last second, Maguire closes his hips on the ball and is able to thread a pass between the lines, finding Bruno Fernandes in that half space area. And this is the benefit of using a front five against a back four, as Robertson has to push out onto Bruno Fernandes, and this is truly elite level play from Fernandes, as he's got the vision and the technique to be able to subtly just flick the ball first time out to Mazraoui, who's pushed ahead of Gakpo, becoming the free man. And once the ball goes into Mazraoui, Bruno Fernandes turns Robertson and is now able to burst into the space that he's created by taking Robertson out of the game with one touch from Maguire's incisive pass. And this is an example of Bruno Fernandes' creativity, but also his patience in possession further up the pitch, as he has the ball here, and you can see that Liverpool are playing an incredibly high line, and Bruno Fernandes recognises this, and so rather than just circulating the ball and keeping possession flowing, Fernandes has the composure to just hold on to the ball, and he's waiting for the run. Eventually Dalot gets into position, makes the arcing run in behind Trent, and Bruno has the vision, as well as the timing and the weight of pass to just play the ball over the top, releasing Dalot into the crossing position. And he does fantastically with this first time left-footed cross, and he almost sets up a clear-cut opportunity for Ahmad, but Ahmad just can't readjust his body positioning, and he isn't able to get the header on goal. But this chance was created firstly from Bruno Fernandes' in-game intelligence and composure in possession, but also his ability to release runners in behind. And so I did have my doubts as to whether Bruno Fernandes could function in a double pivot in Amorim's 3-4-3 system, just because of the athleticism, physicality and defensive output that would be required from him there. But after watching him against Manchester City, Arsenal and in this game against Liverpool, I do think he can make that transition to the deeper role. And I think using Bruno Fernandes in a double pivot alongside either Mainu or Agate, preferably Agate, could actually be beneficial to the whole system. And this is because whilst I do think his primary position will still be as that left interior forward, when he plays there, he is going to be playing more as a playmaker, someone moving towards the ball, looking to receive the ball to feet, dictate the tempo of play, and ultimately be the creator of the side. However, there are certain situations where you'd preferably want more of a winger, someone with better pace and the ability to shift the ball quickly and get a shot away in that role rather than Bruno Fernandes, and this is one example. So Agate receives the ball in the middle of the pitch, and despite being seen as a limited central midfielder by many, which is kind of true in terms of his press resistance and his creative passing, I actually think his short and incisive passing are very underrated in his game. He shapes here like he's going to play the simple pass out to Mazraoui, the right wing back. Gakpo takes a bait and turns his body ready for that pass, before Agate, like Maguire in the previous example, closes his hips on the ball at the last second, creating that disguise, allowing him to then feed the ball inside Gakpo into Ahmad, who's moved into that half space area. And now you can see that because Agate had put disguise on the pass, Gakpo has been wrong-footed, giving Ahmad the time and the space now to drive forward. And you can see on the far side that Bruno Fernandes is making the perfect run. Højlund's movement is also very good, as he makes a run towards the right side, which drags Konate over to United's right with him, which opens up the passing lane for Ahmad to feed Bruno Fernandes. But in this sort of position, Bruno just doesn't have the acceleration or the pace, or really the trickery around the box that someone like a Lookman or an Omar Mamouche would have, and so you'd probably want one of those two in this type of situation. And so in this type of situation, having a interior left forward who had attributes closer to that of a winger or a forward more than a playmaker like Bruno Fernandes, United would probably have a better opportunity to take advantage of this situation. Nevertheless, Bruno Fernandes and Højlund actually both do well. They're just on the wrong wavelength, as Højlund's making a run round the back of Van Dijk, looking for the left-footed cross towards the back post, whereas Bruno Fernandes opts to go to the near post in front of Van Dijk. Højlund hasn't made that run, and even though the ball is actually pretty good, Van Dijk's able to make the interception. And so ideally, whilst Bruno Fernandes' primary position probably would still be as that left interior forward, if Amorim wanted to use at least one kind of playmaker in the front three, especially if you have Mainu and Agate behind, or maybe even Agate alongside Stiller or Reinders, Bruno Fernandes can play that role, but you'd want someone like a Mamouche or a Lookman as an alternative, not just as an option off of the bench to change the dynamic of the attack, but also between games as well, depending on who the opposition is. So Bruno Fernandes, I definitely think, can play in the double pivot, not just for the second half of the season, but also long term as well, depending on what the options are there. But ideally, I think United need to go out and get either Tijani Reinders or Angelo Stiller in the summer, because both would significantly improve United's individual ball progressing ability from in front of the opposition's midfield line, looking to work the ball into the players behind it. However, Reinders and Stiller would specialise in different areas and do this in different ways. Reinders would be particularly good in the build-up phase, when the opposition's midfield line pushes high up the pitch, wherefrom Reinders can look to take advantage of the space in behind the opposition's midfield line by receiving the ball with his back to goal on the edge of the box, drawing the opposition presser in before using his press resistance to turn the player, drive into the space. You'd also then have someone like Lookman in that left interior forward role, who initially in the build-up phase will drop off deep to drag the opposition's fullback high, but as Reinders looks to turn with the ball, Lookman, Mamouche or Garnacho, whoever it is, can now look to spin the pressing player, make a run into the space that they've created, but also open up the space in front for Reinders to now use his athletic ball carrying ability to drive the ball up the pitch, progressing it from the defensive to the middle third, getting the ball in behind the opposition's midfield line in the process. Now Angelo Stiller doesn't have the same ball carrying ability as Reinders, instead he specialises when it comes to the middle third, when the play is more congested, as he, like Reinders, is capable of receiving the ball with his back to goal under pressure, having the ability to put his body between the player and the ball, and the German is fantastic at playing those disguised passes threaded to players between the lines, creating those rondo patterns of play that made Amorim's Sporting so effective. And so overall, Bruno Fernandes has definitely got a future playing in a double pivot, particularly when United are pushing for a goal, can take off one of Mainu or Agate. But if United want to go to the next level, I think bringing one of Stiller or Reinders, because their ball progressing ability both in terms of their carrying and their progressive passing, will massively improve United's ability to progress the ball from the defensive to the middle third and from the middle to the final third.